Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holly, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Cody, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. I want to just start today off by just saying thank you to our listeners. This is the first time Perry and I have had a chance to be in the studio and to be recording, both, if you're listening in the car or exercising, or if you're watching us on YouTube. And we spent some time at the International Maxwell Conference. And so many of you came up to us and talked about the impact of our podcast on you personally, and then how you're using it for your team.
Very encouraging.
Yeah, very encouraging. And Perry and I, that was our highlight. It was our biggest takeaway from our 3 days down there. And by the way, if you don't know what International Maxwell Conference is and you're listening, I want to encourage you. We have an incredible personal growth day the first day, and then we do certification for those that are in the corporate environment or if you're an entrepreneur. And so I'd encourage you to join us. We do it twice a year. But I just wanted to start off by saying that because it was the highlight of our week.
I was blown away by the generosity and kindness of the comments and how people treated us. Just makes you want to pick up and go. Let's go to the next podcast.
Yeah, I think outside of that impact, I think our favorite comment was, we didn't know you two were so tall.
You don't look that tall.
We're like, well, we are sitting down when we're on YouTube, and our voices don't tell you how tall we are, but that was a lot of fun. So thank you again for listening. We're grateful for the impact that's happening across the world, not only on you, but on your teams. Well, as we get started today, just remember that if you go to maxwellleadership.com/podcast, there you can download the learner's guide that Perry's created to go along with the content we're going to discuss today. You can learn more about what we do with organizations by filling out a form and submitting that, and our team will be back in touch with you. So don't hesitate to do that. Well, today's topic is the road back to integrity. And this topic is one that kind of grabbed us. We received an email from a listener, or maybe even somebody that just watches instead of listening on YouTube, and he was talking about a personal failure, a setback that they had experienced, and that the team had forgiven them, and he felt their grace, he felt their trust beginning to build back from something that had happened to him in the past. And hearing us talk about the importance of integrity on a previous episode really just kind of triggered him to send this email to us and said, can you talk a little bit about, or how would you deal with this? I'm continuing to wear it, even though my team is not. And I think all of us have been there before, personally and professionally. And so is that part of your reputation forever? Do you ever get past that? Are you able to rebuild the integrity? And I know you and I talk a lot about the 5 levels of leadership and how it takes so much time to build that influence. And then when trust is broken, it's like, right back down to level 1. We have a lot of examples of that in the public, but we also all personally probably experienced that in the past. So super grateful for the transparency, but talk a little bit about the road back to integrity, the topic and the content that you have for us today.
Yeah, thanks. When we got that email, you and I both received it at the same time, and I just reached out to you and I said, my first reaction was I would not do a podcast on this. And then I thought, you know what? I have struggled.
No doubt.
And I thought, I bet almost all of us have some way or another have struggled with, like you said, climbing those levels of influence, be everything going great, make a personal failure of some sort, and then fall back down and lose that trust. And I thought maybe we should talk about that. And what grabbed my attention was this individual, pressed on the fact that he felt like he was this was on him forever.
Right.
He couldn't get away from it. And I just wanted to put my arms around him and say, hey, we all make mistakes. We all come up short from time to time. And I really, I did write him personally and say, I really appreciate your courage in reaching out. You didn't have to do that, but it caused me to start thinking about, how does someone reconcile being a person, he asked a question. I'm trying to be a person of influence, but I have this thing hanging over me forever. I said, not only if you look backwards, let's look forward. So I thought, are there some things we can do that, if you fail in some area, it could be a personal failure, it could be a business failure. how do you get back on the road to integrity, and don't let the past overwhelm you and take you down permanently.
Yeah, that's good.
But I thought this person really got me thinking about it, and that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, recovering from any type of, and when we say failure, this could be a failed project. This could be maybe failed communication. It could be all kinds of things in regards to this, where you may wear that kind of personally or internally. And so whether it's a business, whether it's personal, whether it's a moral issue, there's a process to recovering from this. And so I love your title today where you said the road back to integrity. And so I just want everybody to know that if we have a setback, that it doesn't define us. That failure, that failed project, that whatever it might be, that's an event, but it's not who you are as an individual.
That's really good.
And I want to make sure that people understand that it won't define you. It's not who you are. It is part of your story. And we're going to talk about this today, about how do you then begin the process of recovering. And so I know you have some ideas, and we're going to talk about what this looks like on this journey.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, that's a great. That just it doesn't identify. I'm not identifying as a failure.
That's right.
It's an event. I'm not a person. It's not a person. It's just something that happened, and now I make a decision. Number one thing I thought you have to do, and this person that wrote in captured it right away. He said, acknowledge and take responsibility for your actions. It's tempting. Depending on what it is, to want to hide it, to want to somehow excuse it, maybe to blame others, to blame the circumstances, blame the government, blame the president. I don't know. We're blaming everybody today. Yeah. No. The first thing that you need to do is to take ownership of it, acknowledge it, and that's the first step on the road back to integrity. Is I'm guilty. Did this? This happened. I own it. Now let's move forward.
I even think about some of our KPIs that as business owners that we have, and sometimes we don't attain those. Sometimes we fall a little bit short. Okay, that could be a failure, and I know that maybe that's not necessarily in the same line as with the moral failure or the integrity. But at the same point in time, I love what you said, which was take ownership of it, be responsible. The next thing I would add to that is then be coachable to those that you trust through that process. And that I think will help as you move along. But make sure that as you're working through this, that you talk to, you confess, you communicate, you're transparent to those that you have hurt in the process of this failure. Your failures of integrity rarely just hurt you. Matter of fact, I don't know if they ever just hurt you. There are other people involved, and that's the first step, is making sure that we are communicating to those people. You may need to go one by one. It may take you a little bit of time. You may need to maybe go have a lunch, maybe have an outside of the office meeting, and just have a very candid conversation to be able to acknowledge your mistakes, take responsibility, and then work towards making amends with those people, those that you have affected. I also want to say that it's not just those that maybe were personally impacted by this, but those that are aware of it as well. You need to communicate it so that they understand that you are remorseful, that you are living in the moment of the mistake and owning it. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of water cooler talk around organizations, and so it does impact more than people that it directly impacts, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. It reminds me of John. I heard John. He talks about this from the stage, about how you need to, be a little vulnerable and confess. Tell people about your struggles and that acknowledge your mistakes. And he had an executive come up out of the audience and say, "I totally disagree. I would never tell anybody about my mistakes. Why do you say I should tell people about my mistakes?" And John just calmly tells him, because they already know. They just want to know if you know. And when they know that you know,
then we're good.
Yeah, then we're
on the road back. Yeah.
I'll say here too that people are people. They're some people are going to love the fact that you confess and receive that. Some are going to judge you. Some may reject you. It's really that's on them. But your role is to acknowledge and own it. And then that'll be the first step. You can't be responsible for how other people respond to that.
Yeah, that's good. As we move into the next point, I just had a thought, and I wanted to just share with this. Maybe you're on the other side of being impacted by somebody that had an integrity issue. I want to encourage all of us not to put people on pedestals. Yeah. You just mentioned it, because we are people. It's going to happen, right? And sometimes our expectations of people and of leaders is put on a pedestal that they'll never be able to live up to.
Right.
And I've seen that happen over and over again. So that was a little bit of my delay there just a minute because you had me thinking about that. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context or maybe a little thought to those that are on the other side of it. Well, the second thing you have for us here is practice self-reflection. So take time to reflect on what happened. Where did the problem occur? Why did the problem occur? You know, oftentimes we talk about this because we travel a ton and we work a lot of hours. And I would just say a lot of times when you reflect on some of those things, you can identify what those triggers were. Like I'll give a completely non-relevant example to a moral failure, but you know, when I'm trying to watch my weight and I'm on the road and I'm tired, I go buy Five Guys in the airport and I'm like, I am making a bad decision right here. And I go ahead and do it because I'm tired. But just be aware as you self-reflect, because then the next morning I'm like, I feel miserable. Why did I do that? I'm like, oh, it's because I was tired and I was hungry and I made a bad decision and I went to Five Guys.
Yes.
Right?
That's why I like this idea of self-reflection is, once I acknowledge it, maybe I should look at what caused it. Where are my triggers, like you said? What are the circumstances that occurred? Can I make sure that I put boundaries in place that would avoid that happening? But I can only do that by reflecting and thinking and being honest with myself. And we always talk about self-reflection is one of the key components of self-awareness. It's easy to fool myself to think, I'm doing pretty good. Matter of fact, I had a pretty hard day. Having a little Five Guys. Who's gonna take? Who would argue that? And think, I can justify a lot of things, but if I'm being honest with myself and that reflection to go, I notice when I'm tired and I've had a long day and I'm running through the airport, I am tempted to do this. How can I put a barrier, a boundary? How can
100%.
I put a fence around that?
I think we might have just found a sponsor for our podcast.
Yeah, and
the Five Guys.
Jake to make a run. I'm starving all of a sudden.
That's right. So real
okay.
quick though, another thing around this self-reflection that I want to add is make sure that your actions are in alignment with your personal values, and I think that gives you part of this decision-making filter. Now, you may say, well, I don't even really know what my personal values are. Well, that's where we're going to start because that'll allow you to have some of those guardrails to be able to say, this wasn't necessarily in alignment with my values, or I need to make sure that I'm aware of my values so that I can make sure I do X, Y, and Z, and then learn from that failure. But to your point, the self-reflection, and we've learned this from all the years of the work that we've done with our military, with the after-action reviews, and John talks about it as well, even from an experiential standpoint. It's not about the experience, positive or negative. It's what did you learn? What did you reflect on about that experience? That'll be the takeaway.
Yeah, number 3, I think we've just hit it a little bit.
Yeah.
Was that's okay. It's really an interesting topic to me that we want to make these steps, take the ownership, and then number 3 I said was establish guardrails or boundaries to ensure that it never happens again. And so with that self-reflection allows me to kind of understand how these triggers, how these things happen, and what are the boundaries I need to put in place. This was a concept I never understood when I was younger, and as I've gotten more maturity and grown up and realized that everything's possible. You can do almost anything now, but not everything is profitable. And so what should I be doing? And do I I know at my house I have a small yard, but I have a fence around it. And that fence tells me what's mine and what's someone else's. And so I like this in this role of my life is the boundaries. What's in play and what's out of play for me? Where do I need to draw the lines? And I just love even a guardrail. Guardrails are not right beside the road; they're back a bit from the road, but they keep you from disaster happening. You can go off the road a little bit, but if you go too far, you got a guardrail to bring you back. So I like this idea of people around you are watching, and you've confessed. You said, yeah, I had this problem. Yeah, I did this, but then they see you doing the same habits that led you to that. It's going to result in lack of trust. Your inconsistency will breed lack of trust.
Yeah,
in them.
I love that. I went to a university where the chancellor and kind of the president of the university was very interactive with the students and was always around having a good time, high-fiving at all the social events and at the athletic activities. But he made it very clear. He used to always say that. He said, listen, And we always knew he drove this big black Suburban around school and honked at you, tried to hit you. I mean, it's just a lot of fun. But he made it very clear. He said, even if we're in the worst snowstorm, rainstorm, or whatever, if I'm driving down the road and there's a member of the opposite sex, I may honk and wave at you, but I will not stop to pick you up. And it was just a guardrail that because what was the perception of, seeing people get in the car or, all those things. To your point, set some of those guardrails and those boundaries up so that doesn't happen again. Well, number 4 is practice consistency. I love this. John talks about consistency compounding, but integrity is built through that. It's built through your consistent actions over time and what you're doing according to your values on a daily basis. This is a combination of vulnerability and being consistent, and that will begin to build that road back to integrity of what you're trying to do. No one expects you to be perfect. None of us are perfect. Well, Perry and I might be, but besides that, no one is perfect. And but they do expect you to be honest. Yeah. And I know that even in some of my personal relationships, sometimes I try to be perfect in the way that I'm wired, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, just be honest and own up to the fact that you're not perfect.
And a lot of us, you mentioned at the very top of the broadcast about, leaders sometimes on a pedestal. We're put there by others, but to be honest, sometimes we like being there.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't mind you thinking I'm perfect. I'm not trying to make you think I'm perfect, but I don't mind if you think I'm perfect or you think highly of me. And I thought that's really setting us up to not be consistent, not be honest with ourselves. So that vulnerability word about sharing where my weaknesses are, sharing where I need help, sharing things I don't know. It opens the door to trust, and that people say, "Wow, you're real." Most leaders would never say, "I don't know." The three most unused words in leadership. "I don't know" says, I'm opening the door for you to help me, and to say that. So it builds trust in that, and consistency just says it builds psychological safety with people. I know you're a known quantity. I know how you're going to, like your chancellor, I know how he's going to respond in every situation. Yep. He's very consistent in that, and that brings more trust to say that I'm that consistency and that vulnerability. I love that. And then number 5 is establish, or I said reconnect, to your inner circle. And if you're not familiar with this term, inner circle, it is another thing I didn't know as a young leader, but I think we all, as leaders, as humans, need to have someone in our life that will loves us unconditionally, will watch over us unwaveringly. Yeah. They will make sure that they'll call us when we're doing something silly. They'll commend us when we're doing something well. We can bring things to them. My inner circle, probably 2 guys. My wife's in there, of course, but she'll, for some reason, has no problem telling me what she thinks. But these 2 guys, I have to really urge them and say, I want you to watch over me. We share this with each other, and we can tell each other anything, and they want to know where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing. They follow my actions, my reactions, my interactions, and they'll call me on stuff. And I just love having this group. Small. It's usually, if you have 3, it's amazing. 1 or 2 would be amazing, just to have somebody that knows what you're doing and can see how you're acting and can call you on it. I use it for self-awareness. When I enter a room, could you watch and see how am I received? How am I carrying myself? Am I communicating? Am I connecting? Because it's easy to fool ourselves. And I saw that inner circle is that safety net for me that says I have somebody watching.
Yeah, speak truth into you. I love that idea. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, there's a couple of things. Just to review, the 5 points that Perry brought to us today as we think about this road back is, number 1, acknowledge and take responsibility for your actions. Number 2, practice self-reflection. Number 3, establish those guardrails and boundaries so that it never happens again. Number 4, practice consistency. And then finally, the inner circle that you were just talking about. Establish an inner circle and allow them to speak truth into you. Let me just close by saying this. We talked about in the beginning about the 5 levels of leadership and building influence with your people, both personally and professionally, takes time. Yes, when mistakes happen, trust is broken, it does kind of bring you right back. Here's the good news. There is a road back to building that influence again. We gave you some points here, and as you work through these points that Perry brought to us, you'll see your influence begin to increase. You go to level 2, you'll go to level 3, and you'll begin to work your way up. It's not going to be quick, It's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. And understand this, as leaders, we all make mistakes. And so if you're transparent, if you're vulnerable, if you go through these steps in this process, your team will forgive you. And then remember this, as a team member, just know that the foot could be on the shoe could be on the other foot at some point in time. So let's show a little bit of grace. Let's not put people on pedestal, and let's walk through that with them.
Beautiful. Thank you. And to the listener who wrote in, thanks for your courage in doing that. And to any of you that would like to send us a question or a comment, we'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to know more about what we're doing here at Maxwell Leadership, or would like to leave a question or a comment, you can do all that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. Also download the learner guide for this episode. We're grateful for you joining us today. We're very grateful that you would spend this time with us. That's all today from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.